Today, we're talking from ideas to ecosystems. For years, impact has been full of ideas, bold visions, inspiring talks, powerful intentions. But ideas alone don't change systems. My guest today is someone who understood early on that real impact doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when people, capital, and courage come together. Will Hayler is the co-founder of Blue Earth Summit, a platform that goes far beyond traditional conference. Blue Earth was created to bring together entrepreneurs, investors, brands, and change makers, not just to talk about sustainability and impact, but to accelerate collaboration, unlock capital, and build solutions together. What Will and his brother Guy have built is not just an event, it's an ecosystem, space where connection replaces competition and where impact is designed to scale. I'm Marisa Selfa, and this is the Impact Legacy podcast, where bold voices and brave ideas build the legacies of tomorrow. Today, we explore what it really takes to move from intention to action, from conversation to collaboration, and from ideas to systems that last a long time. Will, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Will, tell us what happened in your life that made you realize that you needed to create Blue Earth?
Oh, I think there's many different routes towards it, but an entrepreneurial journey. I think it's always been in my blood. I also run Blue Earth, as you say, with my brother and a third partner, a chap called Linley. And as a three, we've always worked together. We've all had that entrepreneurial mindset. And I think entrepreneurs love solving problems. And I think Blue Earth is tackling some of humanity's biggest problems. And we really believe that an entrepreneurial mindset is what's needed.
So what do you think was missing in the impact space to make you believe that this concept was needed?
I think entrepreneurs. I think we felt that whole space was absolutely jammed full of information, and the outcome was, this is very complicated, this is slow moving, and so what we felt is, actually, hang on a minute, why don't we simplify this? Who are the best people at taking a really complex problem and coming up with a solution? So what we thought was missing is really talented entrepreneurs that are good at problem solving, and that is the sort of the nucleus of what Blue Earth is all about.
So it started as an event, right?
Yeah, it did. Well, it actually started for our background in media and storytelling and what inspires people. So there's three things that we like to do. We like to inspire people, connect people, and drive action. And I think the inspiration bit is as simple as just protect what you love. Let's talk, not talk in sort of what we're trying to avoid. Let's talk about what we're trying to protect, because we love it. So our media background was all around surfing and the outdoors and nature and all these sort of adventurous different things that we'd get involved in different businesses that we'd been involved in. And we sort of saw the power of business that was just really missing. Is business part of the problem, or is it part of the solution? And we really see it as an opportunity to bring it in as part of the solution.
Absolutely. I say that a lot because, in this world of trying to make an impact, everybody's talking about politics. And yeah, they can do part, but I believe it's going to take a long time if we wait for politics to solve the issue. So I do believe it's the private sector and the business that need to drive the change. So the way you're doing that, I really love the way you're doing it, because you're getting companies that are competition in the same place and all trying to collaborate towards the same goal. So tell me, is there anything you've learned about that human behavior and that, the way that all these companies are working together, regardless industries and business?
Yeah, what I think I'm totally engaged with humanity and what the role of, what makes humans who we are, what we are, and what's, I think we've had a decade of evolution, and I think we've had centuries of evolution, and now we're living through an absolute decade of total change, transformational change, and I think when you look at humans, we actually like being on the winning team. When you really look at how we interact, you like being part of the winning team, and I think too much time has been spent within the climate space is saying that we're on the losing team. If you're in the climate box, well, be prepared to get a kicking. You're not getting enough done. You're not moving fast enough. You're just good at being on the losing team. And what I think, if you reframe that and say, for the entrepreneurs that solve problems around how we live, how we eat, how we travel, how we build houses, how we, materials, all these amazing innovations that are just transforming all the way through. If those things have a positive impact on the world, that's a massive win. You talk about triple bottom line, having that sort of, as well as profit, but actually I think people got a bit too stuck on logic. We should be doing this and we should be doing that. Well, actually, why did we not do that? And I think there was a perception there that it was, you could do that if you wanted to go slower, or you could do that if you wanted to be more expensive. And I think what we're trying to do, and I think that successfully, and the entrepreneurs that are in our network are really understanding, is you've got to outcompete. If you don't like the way the world works, come up with something better. And I think that in a nutshell is what we understand, and we're sort of driving a movement around that.
I like the word movement. I believe that's exactly what you're doing, trying to get the right financing to the right companies. I've been in a couple of your events with Impact Tailors. Do you think there's a real focus on impact funds right now? Are we having enough? Are they focused in the right things? Are they looking for the unicorn?
Yes, yeah, they definitely are. And how amazing would that be if that has, if we take it straight back to sort of base level, the role of business is to serve the need of society. And I think in the last 50 years, that connection with people and planet for business has actually worn away. And I think business has sort of forgot that when it's really at its most powerful and its most impactful is when it's serving the needs of humanity. And as a human species, we actually need the planet that we live on to be healthy too. And I think when you're looking for things that people will latch onto, that's just logical then. Well, business needs to fix the world and serve the needs of society. But actually, I think a lot of the talent is not in that space. And I think one of the roles that Blue Earth has got to do is to say, we need new voices, we need new ideas, and we need more money. That is essentially, when you ask what's missing within the climate space, ideas, different voices, and money. And I think that is essentially, how can we bring a platform together that inspires those new voices, that new ideas, and connect it with investment? Because when things scale, when things get money and they can get to a bigger scale, the price comes down. And when the price comes down, the affordability and it becomes more widely available. I think when we first looked at the climate space, there was a green premium. Oh, it costs more. Oh, but that's okay because it's better for the environment. And that should work, but it hasn't worked fast enough. And I think there is a reality that if you want to build consensus around solutions that are going to make the world a better place, you've got to, if you want politics involved, they want economic growth. And if you want people involved, they want it to be cheaper, faster, more reliable, and easier to get hold of.
Do you think there's any misconception around impact-led growth still?
Yeah, I think people think that it's virtuous and it's not competitive. You can say, oh, I could put my money in that climate fund. It will do less well than if I went and put it in an alternative fund. And I think when you, depending on what your view of humanity is, I think we are all in a race. We're called the human race. Mm-hmm. And whether or not we want to be on that race, the society and the systems that we have teach us to just get on the race. And I think there is a perception within the word impact that you would be slowed down by that. Whereas what we're saying is, well, hang on, Matt, what if you turn that into a superpower that actually, entrepreneurs who succeed are delivering things that people need. And I think what the climate science and the academia and NGOs have been calling for is, we need this. But I don't think they're able to come up with the solutions that enable people to buy in. I think there's been too much of a barrier to entry. I think the climate movement has got stuck in its own way. Whereas, I think in a case of where there's very much a perception of who's allowed in and who's not allowed in. Well, they're great because they're absolutely, a pin-up for doing everything in the right way. That sort of perfectionist. But actually, I think no one's perfect. And actually, if you put a filter in and say, well, these are the people that are allowed into the space and these are people that are not allowed in the space, that becomes a very exclusive club. And if the climate world could have solved climate change on its own, it would have already done it. And I think there's now an admission in 2026 to say we need more people, more ideas and more money. And I think that over the 6 years that we've been developing Blue Earth we're the platform that can open up a wider net. And we're enjoying doing it, and we're making it fun. It's a fun place to be.
It is definitely. But it's true that, we can't be looking for perfection. I think it's about progress, because every business, whether you really try to do in a more sustainable, responsible way, everything has an impact. But it's about lowering the negative impact and adding up on the positive one, right? Do you think some businesses are still playing small? I mean, in a way that some of the businesses that I know are still focusing definitely only on profit, but there's no real courage to do things differently, regardless of cost.
Yeah, I think if it's viewed in the wrong way, we talk about perception on logic, and if you're saying, well, this is something that we should be doing, and if that's the attitude that people go into it with, if it's something you should be doing, you're almost thinking naturally, well, what's the least of that thing we should be doing? What's the least of that I can do? But if you can find ways that it becomes a competitive advantage to your business, you'll be trying to do as much of it as possible. And so, talk about sort of supply chain. If you're a beer producer, and the crops that you need to produce beer become more expensive because of flooding, it is a competitive advantage to find ways to produce those crops in a more adaptive, more resilient way. And so, and I think the world is really excitingly working up to that. This climate change is real. Floods are happening all the time. Extreme weather events it's not just, it's almost, we're in this cycle of, I think for years, of naming storms. They're running out of names.
That's true.
And
I can't keep up with them anymore.
And so it's not
terrible.
just one a month. It's almost one a week.
Yes.
And so then you think of these businesses that are going to say, well, we need to adapt and we need to become more resilient to a changing world. So that, I think we're in this sort of perfect storm where the effects of climate change are absolutely there. On top of that, we have another opportunity in technology. New technology is enabling us to think and work much smarter and much faster. And especially for entrepreneurs, we can be leaner and we can really sort of use technology in such a positive way. And then at the same time, to bring it back down to reality, political consensus has dropped away from climate. Is it a vote winner? And of course it should be. Absolutely, it should be. And most politicians, if you speak to them without a microphone, would say, I would like it to be. But to make it a vote winner, you've got to find a way, and this is the challenge to the private sector, where it creates markets and delivers economic growth, because then you'll get that political moment with I call them hard hat moments, where the politician turns up, puts his arm around the entrepreneur and said, look what I did.
I'm one of the people that think that climate change should not be a political agenda. It shouldn't be the right or left. It should be in every agenda, regardless of, political parties. I think we're a long way from that.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things in that. Every time we talk about what should be happening, that doesn't mean that it is happening. And I think entrepreneurs are pretty resilient people. We're pretty adaptive. We're pretty. There's an amazing book out there called Anti-Fragile. I don't know if you've read about it.
I haven't.
But
no.
it talks about things that benefit from hardship. So, and in nature, things that, if you hack the branch of a tree, it'll grow back faster. And I think entrepreneurs are perfect examples of anti-fragile. Something bad happens when you turn that bad situation into something good. And I think when you look at political consensus dropping away from climate change, which of course it shouldn't have, but that is an absolute red rag to a bull entrepreneur that will say, well, I'm going to work even harder to make that solution even more compelling, and that market will change faster. So in the last 3 years, politics has gone crazy. I think most people would agree with that.
Yes.
And that
Unfortunately, actually.
unfortunately it has. But that says to the entrepreneurs working on climate solutions, we've got to be even better. We've got to be even more compelling, because once you've created a market and once you've created change from the ground up, politicians get on board. They can't not get on board, especially if you're working in if you're working in America or you're working in Europe, in a sort of democratic country. Politics is wherever there's economic growth, you will find politics. And so the entrepreneurs have got to find ways to transform the way the world works in a way that delivers economic growth for politicians and themselves. Let's not beat around the bush. The entrepreneurs that find these solutions deserve to have profitable businesses, and they'll have profitable businesses if they've got customers, and they'll have customers if their solutions are cheaper. And so, that if we're working from the middle, entrepreneurs understand that. And so what a perfect time to be an entrepreneur in this space, coming up with solutions that's going to make the world work better.
This is the Impact Legacy podcast. So tell me, for you, when you look at the future, what is the legacy that you're expecting Blue Earth to leave behind?
Well, I think we are in year 6, which is tiny in event space. Most events that, we look up to are sort of 10 years in, but every year, it's like sort of planting that seed and then coming back to it in 5 years' time. We had entrepreneurs yesterday where we had an investment forum, and some of those entrepreneurs and some of those people within our network have been coming over the last 2 years, and their revenues have grown, and the investors in the space have seen those revenues grow, and they have then had the confidence to invest. So I think we're looking to discover new businesses, and also just get behind good ideas, because not every person with a good idea necessarily knows how to run the business. And so we're really sort of building an ecosystem and a network of people that can really supercharge an idea, and connect people to say there is a technical mind that's come up with a solution to a complicated problem, but they don't have the finance, and they don't have the finance because they don't have the team around them. And so a lot of sort of talent that comes to our summits, and they're fun. They're deliberately fun. We're deliberately throwing a party. If you want to change the world, throw a better party. And that's if we were to say that to sort of the cops of this world, or just make it much more aligned to innovation, and then you're going to get the next generation of talent. Because another massive positive within generational shift is the graduates that are coming through at sort of their 20s and 30s. It's absolutely, if you ask them to start a business, having a positive impact on people and planet, like, it's absolutely their mindset. They've grown up with that. It's our generation actually that didn't need to do that.
True.
And so there's so much to be positive about, and I just can't understand why so many events decide to leave people with doom and gloom. It creates a narrative that is important, but it doesn't create change. And if you're really in he's talking about legacy, and you're really looking to make change, then it won't be the legacy of Blue Earth. It will be the businesses that have come to Blue Earth that have gone on to do great things. So that's what we're about.
Definitely, entrepreneurs have a responsibility right now. And I can't imagine somebody setting up a new business without thinking on the impact and the triple bottom line. Really, that's, to me, is a non-negotiable.
One of the massive superpowers that Blue Earth has really been sort of building over the last 6 years, and is going to continue to do, is bringing people together, where ideas meet investment. And then entrepreneurs love talking to each other because they know how hard it can be. That journey is never a straight line. We can all put business plans together and say it's just going to be exponential growth, but we know that bumps along the way, and the best entrepreneurs are the ones that deal with that. And then the same for the investor community. Investors love following each other. I'm in if they're in. And how does that entrepreneur get ahead there? Well, they've got to meet a network of people. And so when we say we're building a movement on a mission to transform the way the world works, that movement is deliberately calling signal to say, come on, get involved and come and be part of what's next. And when we get people together, we make it fun, and we make it inspiring, we make it forward thinking, we make it optimistic. And that's why everyone enjoys coming to the platforms that we're building.
Fantastic. That's great. Let's end with a challenge. We always like to hear from our guests a challenge that I can take right now, and everybody that is listening to it could really impact, because impact is not about something major that is going to transform the world in 24 hours. It's about the little things all of us can do. So please, Will, tell us, what is it that we could do that could have an impact?
Okay, so I think if we're focusing on the entrepreneurs, I think we've spoken a lot about supporting entrepreneurs. I would say spend less time on social media. I think it's turning people crazy. I think you're looking for validation there, and to get noticed, you're having to go into the extremes. And I think there's a role of social media, and I think it can be a powerful tool, but I think it can be a really distracting tool. So if you're really wanting to focus more time on yourself, on your business, on your family, on your health, less time on social media, I think is just, they're deliberately addictive, these platforms. And I think know when to put it down and do other things.
I love it, and I think all of us can do it. But it's true, to me, the word distracting is important. As an entrepreneur, definitely you can get very distracted there and spend a lot of time with no return, really.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. That's definitely a great challenge. Very inspiring, Will. Thank you. Thank you very much. Will Hayler reminds us that the future won't be built by individuals. It will be built by communities, by ecosystems, by people willing to share power, knowledge, and opportunity. Because the challenges we face are too complex for competition and too urgent for isolation. Thank you, Will, for providing that when we bring the right people together, impact doesn't just grow, it multiplies. And thank you for joining the Impact Legacy podcast. If this conversation inspires you, don't keep it to yourself, share it. Start a conversation, break a silo, because impact doesn't end in a conversation. It begins with action. I'm Marisa Selfa, and this is the Impact Legacy podcast, where purpose becomes progress and impact becomes legacy.